I just want to, before we go in, I'm going to take this.
That's a big improvement, eh, besides?
Yeah.
Friends and neighbors of DRAO, scientific colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here today to join with us in celebrating the 25th anniversary of this observatory. My name is Lloyd Higgs, and I've had the privilege of being the director of the Dominion Radio Astrophysical Observatory for the past 4 years. A very short period indeed compared to the long association that many of the people in the audience today have had with DRAO. First of all, I'd like to introduce some of our invited guests. I wish that time would allow me to introduce every one of you by name, but hopefully the name tags will suffice, because we're absolutely delighted that so many of our friends, former staff members, and colleagues have taken the effort and time to join us today. From the National Research Council of Canada, our parent organization, we have with us Dr. Ross Pottie, Vice President for the Physical Sciences and Engineering Laboratories of NRC. It is under his direction that the Hertzberg Institute of Astrophysics, of which DRAO forms a part, carries out basic research and provides national facilities in the field of the time to travel all the way from Ottawa to here in midweek, which we really appreciate, to bring us the greetings of the federal government. From British Columbia, we have with us our M.L.A., the Honourable Jim Hewitt, Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs, along with our keynote speaker, the Honourable Pat McGeer, Minister of Science, Universities and Communications for BC. Has come to represent the regional district. And finally, we all know that one of the great attractions of DRAO is the fine city to the north of the observatory that offers a quality of life for our staff that is second to none in Canada. Mr. Ivan Messmer, Mayor of the City of Penticton, is here representing that community. We are also very fortunate in having diverted to Penticton two gentlemen who are leading very active lives in retirement. One is Dr. Jack Locke, the first director of DRAO, later director of the Hertzberg Institute of Astrophysics, and a personal friend of many people in our audience. The second is one of the founders of the science of radio astronomy, Dr. Grote Reber. After lunch, I'll be telling you more about Dr. Reber, a truly remarkable person and a benefactor of this observatory. It's wonderful to note that we have with us today many people who were present at the official opening of DRAO on June 20th, 1960. You'll note that we've actually missed our real anniversary by almost 4 months, but I'm sure you all know how difficult it is for any government department to complete a project on schedule. That day 25 years ago was quite memorable for many reasons, not least of which was the howling wind that accompanied the ceremonies, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that today we don't have a howling wind which accompanies our ceremonies today. Since that time, 25 years ago, when the observatory was established as a small research group in the relatively new science of radio astronomy, it has grown in stature, if not in size, to a major national facility for Canadian astronomy. And we thank you sincerely for being able to come and join us today. Cambridge University has had a long and close association with DRAO, and your presence reminds us of those days when graduate students from the University of Cambridge spent months in the Okanagan. Once again, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you, invited guests, friends, and members of the public who support research institutions such as DRAO through your tax dollars, and I hope that you will have an enjoyable and informative few hours with us. Our staff members are ready to answer all your questions. They can be spotted by the distinctive name badges. I think all the locals have colored badges, and we hope that you'll take time to explore fully our facilities this afternoon. Now, it gives me great pleasure to turn the microphone over to Dr. Ross Pottie, Vice President of the National Research Council. Yes.
Thanks very much, Lloyd. I'm not going to go through the litany of guests and invited guests and all the other people who are present, because you'll hear enough repetition as the day goes on. That's not going to be one of them. As Lloyd has pointed out, DRAO is a national scientific facility. It's owned, operated, and managed by the National Research Council of Canada through the Hertzberg Institute of Astrophysics. NRC is divided into things like laboratories and divisions and so on, and the Hertzberg Institute of Astrophysics is one of our laboratory divisions. DRAO is part of a national network of observatories that NRC maintains for the benefit of Canadian and other nations' astronomers. And I'll mention that aspect of DRAO in a few minutes. The other facilities that were alluded to by Lloyd include the Duncan Radio Observatory. That's another radio observatory of NRC in Ontario. And it's the other major one, the major sister or brother institution of DRAO. We also operate optical observatories, including the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory near Victoria, and a major international observatory in Hawaii, the Canada-France-Hawaii Telescope, which is managed through a corporation that's jointly funded by Canada, France, and the state of Hawaii. Those are the major facilities, but there are many minor facilities at universities as well, and certainly the solar observatories of NRC that are operated in the near the Algonquin Observatory and on the Ottawa River. So there is really quite a significant network that Canada participates in. Now I'll begin by telling you a little bit about, and I'm not going to be very long, about DRAO and where it fits as far as national facilities are concerned. I want to define a national facility, and I'll use just an operating definition. In general terms, it's a facility which provides instrumentation, equipment, and supporting services to the scientific and industrial user community. I'll speak more knowledgeably and far more eloquently on these subjects than I. But I would like to tell you about DRAO as a scientific establishment located in Penticton. Not only has DRAO met all the criteria for scientific excellence that distinguishes a national facility from its lesser beings, but because of the quality of its staff, it has become a regional center as well, and is fully integrated into the community of Penticton. Scientific and technical people are often believed to be aloof and insensitive to their everyday surroundings. This is generally not so, and is emphatically not true of the DRAO staff and their families. They have established themselves as good citizens of Penticton, ready and willing to participate in the issues of the region, and we at NRC look at the staff of DRAO as perhaps our best community of citizens, as well as outstanding scientific and technical achievers. On this high note, I would like to conclude my remarks and thank you for your patience.
Kind comments. I'd now like to turn to the representatives of various levels of government, and I would welcome to the stage Mr. Fred King, our MP from Okanagan-Similkameen.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased indeed to be here to represent the Government of Canada, and more specifically the Honourable Tom Sidden, who is the Minister of State for Science and Technology. And Mr. Sidden has given me a greeting which I will read to you. It states this: congratulations on your quarter century of galactic research. Your contribution to Canada's role on the international stage of radio astronomy since 1960, in particular your continuing development in the Synthesis Telescope, has been significant in developing mankind's understanding of his universe. Let me add my best wishes to those being expressed by the people of Penticton and area on this important occasion in Canadian science. Tom Sidden. I'd like to divert your attention from Ottawa, although I'm pleased to speak on behalf of those in Ottawa. But I'd like to divert your attention back here to the Okanagan and to just remind you of some of the people in the Okanagan who have had a special interest in DRAO over the years and have fought for the preservation of this environment in which it exists, taken on a personal burden to protect this area and this facility. And I think of people like Doreen Adams, who I'm so delighted to see is present with us, and Harley Hatfield, and others who over the years have been a voice of the ordinary citizen in the area. Opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Fred. I'll now call upon Honourable Jim Hewitt to say some words on behalf of the Government of British Columbia.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's certainly a pleasure to be in the Okanagan Valley on a Sunday and a little windy day, but not like it was, I gather, 25 years ago. I'll leave the greetings from the government to my colleague, the Honourable Pat McGeer, who is a minister responsible for science and communications in this province. I'd like to speak for a moment as the M.L.A. for Boundary Similkameen, and I think it's fair to say that all people in this area look, as Fred King has said, sometimes with awe on the scientific activity out here. But what I would like to say on behalf of the people of Boundary Similkameen, you're quite correct stating the fact that the people who work here have become part of our community, have got involved in activities at the business level, at the political level, to be part of our community. And I look down and identify a gentleman who, last time I saw him, had a bit of a beard. A gentleman by the name of Ed Argyle, and Ed, of course, and June Argyle are here. Ed now is retired but used to work out here. He and I sat on Penticton City Council together in 1971, and both grew beards to represent the centennial. And when the Queen visited Penticton, Ed's beard was a little gray and white. Mine was dark and black and bushy. Needless to say, time has passed. Ed doesn't have one anymore, and mine's got a little gray. But we can think back to some of those days that we, at the political level, the regional district, and at the municipal level, our concerns about White Lake. We've had good communication with the people here, and good dialogue over the years, and even as recent as a few months ago when Lloyd Higgs and others met with the Honorable Pat McGeer and myself to discuss the long baseline array and the future for White Lake. Done, and wish you success for the future, and hopefully we'll all be back together again in another 25 years to say congratulations and a job well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. We have with us this morning also the chairman of the regional district of Okanagan-Similkameen, within whose territorial jurisdiction the observatory lies, and I'd like to welcome Duncan McDougall to say a couple of words.
Honored guests and ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here and participate with you on your 25th anniversary. This is your 25th anniversary. The regional district is approaching their 20th year. So we have shared mutual interests for a considerable period of time. We're celebrating the opening of the proposed Canadian long baseline array. Again, congratulations on your 25th anniversary.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the city that so many of us call home, I'd like to call it
pleased to bring congratulations on behalf of the citizens of Penticton on your 25th anniversary. And the radio observatory, of course, is very important to the city of Penticton. They have given Penticton recognition all over the world. I guess you would be fair to say that this observatory probably put Penticton on more maps than we'd ever be able to accomplish. And the only other event that gave us that type of international event was the Penticton V's. Very much.
Well, we've been very fortunate today in enticing Dr. Pat McGeer, Minister of Science, Universities and Communications, to come and join us and give a short address. Dr. McGeer always has something interesting to say, and he's always well worth listening to. I don't know what he's going to say today, but I'm sure it will be.
Well, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen, it's always a treat for me to come up here because I have an opportunity to visit my place down there on Skaha Lake, and it looks today almost as gorgeous as the campus here of this National Research Facility. Well, Mr. Mayor, you said that this facility had put Penticton on the map in a way that hasn't been done since the Penticton V's. But the point really is that this facility has put the map of the heavens on the world. And there you see it on the front of this podium. There is no question, and the mayor and of course you, Fred, and Jim recognize that when you have the privilege of having in your midst a scientific facility that is continually making discoveries which the world recognizes, then there is an achievement associated with that area, this Penticton area, that continually emphasizes to the world the importance and significance of the work that goes on. So that's why all of the major astronomy facilities around the world are well known physically to the public of the world. And so it is with Penticton and this facility here, so that all of you people locally have got to realize that it brings fame and importance to this area, and it needs every bit as much support as all of you can put behind it. Though I can tell you from personal experience that both Fred and Jim do about as much as members could possibly do to boost and support the important work that goes on here. Now I'd like to say just a word or two of a layman, and in this field of science I really do qualify as a layman. In any event, what has happened over this period of time is that the advances in electronics have made it possible for people to explore the heavens going beyond the traditional optical devices which characterized astronomy up until this very recent era. And of course, right at the forefront of the movement from optical devices to the radio devices was this facility here. And as this spectrum began to change and broaden, so it became possible for people to have this cornucopia of unexpected findings and new knowledge that then became correlated with our understanding of particle physics, because the high energy accelerators are only duplicating in the most minute possible way what goes on in that fantastic high energy physics laboratory in the sky. Gain enormously. If only we can develop the one skill which we conspicuously lack in this country. And that one skill is understanding how to manage science for our own good. That is what we lack in Canada. That is our great weakness compared with other advanced nations in the world. In Canada, the non-scientists do not understand how to manage science. You have to leave the scientists to do their own work in their own way. But the rules are so simple that one wonders why this magic formula hasn't penetrated to the policy-making levels of our government. Their 25th anniversary, our congratulations, our respect and admiration for what has been achieved to date, our good wishes for their future, because they're going to contribute so much to our future.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're drawing to the finale of these presentations on the occasion of our 25th anniversary. And in conclusion, I don't think there'd be any more fitting a speaker than our next. And Dr. Locke was the first director of DRAO. He was head of the stellar physics branch at the Dominion Observatory in Ottawa and came to Penticton in 1959 to set up this observatory. After 3 years here, he returned to his position in Ottawa. Later, he joined the National Research Council of Canada, and when DRAO was taken under the wing of NRC, he was the head of the astrophysics branch of NRC. And finally, when the Herzberg Institute of Astrophysics was created in 1975, Dr. Locke became its first director. the position he held until his retirement in March of this year. Jack has always been a friend and a strong supporter of this observatory, and I'm delighted to call upon Jack to tell us something about the early years of DRAO. Jack?
This visit to White Lake is a nostalgic one for me, for some of my fondest memories are of time spent here at the observatory. I have fond memories also of the enjoyable times spent with my family when we lived in Penticton and were drawn into the social life of that beautiful city. Since that time I have, of course, visited here many times, and so it was with some misgivings that I realized, when I retired officially about 6 months ago, that I might never visit the DRAO again. I am grateful, therefore, to Dr. Higgs for inviting me to participate in these ceremonies commemorating the 25th anniversary of the official opening of the DRAO about 30 years ago in, above all places, Ottawa. It was a time when scientists in many countries were finally awakening to the important role which radio astronomy could play in answering important questions about the universe. It seems incredulous to us now that this awakening should have taken so long. Karl Jansky had made the initial discovery more than 20 years before, in 1932, but his work had been largely ignored by the astronomers of the day. There was, however, one person who did not ignore the discovery. That person was Grote Reber, who was until the end of World War II the only radio astronomer in the world, but by the National Research Council, and the large vehicle belongs to them. We erected an antenna, which you can see in the photograph, a rotating antenna with which to measure the interference at the site. We had a few on the 20th of June 1960 at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Many prominent scientists from both the United States and Canada attended. A large group came from Ottawa, government officials and leading scientists by a special plane. So we had a rather good gathering. And the next slide shows the scene on that day. Lloyd has referred to the fact that it was windy on that particular day, and you can see that it is because the Union Jack is standing straight out. The next slide shows the platform on that particular day. The people on the platform, I'll mention later. The wind that day blew the sand into the faces of the dignitaries on the platform, which included, of course, the minister.
Jack, for taking us back 25 years. It's a real pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings to a close our presentations this morning, available in the building next door, and we hope that you can either sit out in the lawn to eat or maybe back in here to get out of the wind. If there are any members of the public here, they're welcome to get coffee, and you see that coffee is located out on our cherry picker. After lunch, we'll have the ceremonies over at the Synthesis Telescope, and then later in the afternoon the observatory is open. We have several display areas set up, and a little museum in our library where you can look at the photographs that Jack referred to in the Penticton Herald of 25 years ago. We have a scrapbook in there with many reminiscences of the observatory. And I might point out that later in the evening, if any of our invited guests are still in town, of course many of our invited guests live in town, we're having an open house at our house from 6 till 7:30, and you're all invited to attend if you may. After that, a bunch of us are heading off to Theo's to celebrate the end of the celebration. I think that Theo's is expecting somewhere between 20 and 60 of us to arrive. So if anybody wants to come to dinner with us, Want us closer together? Yep. People. Okay.
Everyone this way, please.
By the way, this is the new Reber building, which will be officially opened later this afternoon.
Where did you disappear to? I was in the library. Oh, you. Bit on that end, Chris. Just get it a little bit closer. That's good.
I gotta come back. Okay, everybody this way. We're good. We're gonna do a three-way then. One more for luck.
It's time to tear ourselves away from a delightful lunch and continue with the festivities of the day. Before I continue, a few words I'd like to say. First of all, I'd like to express my own appreciation to the numerous spouses and ladies of the observatory who put on this lovely luncheon. I'm overwhelmed. And also I would like to take this opportunity to thank Casabella Wines, who provided the wine for the luncheon, and also to the First Baptist Church in Penticton, who provided all of the audio-visual equipment, the sound systems, etc. Thank you very much. From time to time, unfortunately, well, it's not unfortunately, but from time to time, that's a terrible thing to say. From time to time, some of us have finally achieved the 25-year mark in our careers. And we have with us today one of our staff who has completed 25 years in the public service of Canada, and we have a special award to make to that person. Mr. Jack Dawson, our digital electronics technician at the observatory, although he hasn't been at the observatory for 25 years, he's been here almost exactly, I think, 22 years this month, but previous to that he was working in NRC in Ottawa for 3 years. So I'd like to ask Jack to come forward so I can present him with his 25-year plaque. Signed by the President of the National Research Council and by the Prime Minister of Canada. It's my real privilege to introduce our guest who is going to open our new telescope facility this afternoon. It gives me really great pleasure to introduce Dr. Grote Reber, amateur radio operator in his youth. Grote Reber graduated from the Electrical Engineering School at the Armour Institute of Technology, which is now the Illinois Institute of Technology, in 1933. At that time, he had read about Karl Jansky's discovery of cosmic radiostatic, and he felt that he now had a fresh challenge before him, because up until that time, as a radio amateur, Grote had contacted radio operators all over the world in some 60 countries, and he was beginning to feel that there weren't many more worlds to conquer. However, when he read about the exciting discovery of cosmic radio waves, apparently coming from outside the Earth's atmosphere, and since apparently no one else in the world seemed to be interested in them, he decided that he would embark upon a new venture, and that was to learn more about these radio emissions. Now, at that time, he was an engineer working for a large manufacturer of radio receivers in Chicago, and he had access to test equipment and to workshop facilities. So he undertook to build in his backyard what was then the largest radio antenna in the world, a dish, a steerable dish, 10 meters in diameter. In a series of classic observations between 1937 and 1938 and 1947, Grote Reber mapped the radio emission from the Milky Way galaxy and firmly established the science of radio astronomy. Throughout his career as a professional engineer, later working with the National Bureau of Standards and then with the Research Corporation, Grote also spent every minute of his spare time in his favorite pursuit, the pursuit of knowledge. Grote Reber is a unique individual. I think he's one of the classic examples, and maybe the best example, of the universal scientist or the amateur scientist in the pure sense of the word. I use the word amateur to mean someone who loves the search for knowledge. He's a man who loves the challenge of looking at the world in a way in which no one else has thought of. He's completely unfettered by establishment conservatism and exceedingly wide-ranging in his interests. Early days of our science. And after Grote's speech, we will then all move over to the synthesis telescope when wonderful things will happen when Grote turns it on, we hope. I'm not sure that we have the backup that John had.
Well, I'm flattered to be here, and this trip was brought about by invitation of several organizations to come and talk with them, and when this one and another one chose October, it seemed this was an auspicious month to come to the Northern Hemisphere before the winter set in. Perhaps you'll wonder why I got my name attached to this thing. As I had sensibly nothing to do with designing it or constructing it. However, some 20-odd years ago, I made substantial investments in Canada, which turned out to be peculiarly successful. Some people hang on to every cent they have until they're dead, which I think is pretty stupid. So I thought, in view of the excellent work that's being done here at this observatory, I would be pleased to contribute something financially against the operations here. And when I learned that they were going to build this 408 megahertz installation, I decided that this was a suitable thing for me to support financially. What it has done is double the output of the existing installation at a rather minor cost. The parts that I supported are the circular thing underneath the main focus and some of the electronics that go with it. So that's how I got attached to the thing, and I'm quite proud that it turned out as well as it has. For the ancient history, and see how things developed during the later part of the 19th and early 20th century. He was doing something on a bench with a spark gap, a capacitor, and some coils. And depending on how you read the story, it appears that on the bench was a loop of wire, perhaps 4 inches in diameter, with a very small gap in it, maybe a 32nd of an inch. And he found that when the spark jumped across the main gap of his apparatus, that a little spark jumped across the ends of this ring. This was most unexpected, but it was clear that he had stumbled upon some new kind of an action at a distance. And so he investigated, and he found that this action at a distance was identical with light waves, except the wavelength was 1,000,000 times as long. And these became known as Hertzian waves. And the 20th century, it was a popular thing to do Hertzian wave observations and experiments in university laboratories. Peculiar enough, people invented waveguides even as early as 1901. And they were able to send Hertzian waves down solid glass tubes, which all sounds sort of familiar to the light waves down telephone lines now. Their equipment, of course, was very crude. So, along in the late 90s, another bright and energetic young man appeared on the scene in the name of Guglielmo Marconi. He wasn't burdened with too much knowledge, which was a good thing. And he wanted to use these Hertzian waves not as a laboratory demonstration, but for communication from point to point. He started in Italy, and he got distances of a few yards and a few tens of yards and a few hundred yards and a half a mile and over the hill and so on. And in the late 90s he was able to communicate across the English Channel and then to Ireland. And the stage was set. So he built a big powerful 50 kilowatt transmitter at Poldhu, Cornwall, which is on that southeast tip, the southeast peninsula of England. And he set up a receiver at St. John's, Newfoundland. And he had bad luck with big windstorms, and his antenna blew down. So he used a kite. And on the 12th of December 1901, at 12:20 p.m., he got the first letter S across the Atlantic. He didn't say anything. He tried again the next day. Again success. And he tried again on the third day. Again success. He chose this place because it was at a cable station and he could get communications back to the old world in his transmitter. So the next day he made a public announcement of this, and he invited the governor of Newfoundland to come and witness the tests. And the newspapers were full of scoffing that this young man had mental aberrations, that no such thing ever happened. However, the cable company believed him, and they served a writ on him to cease and desist doing any kind of communications, because they had a monopoly on transatlantic communications. So you can figure out who was wise. Well, that was the thing which set radio off as we know it today, because after that demonstration of 1,700 miles of North Atlantic, a host of inventors and developers and engineers and financiers all entered the field, like DeForest and Poulsen and Alexanderson and many others. And so, due to the efforts of this host of people, by the 1930s we had some pretty sensitive and sophisticated radio equipment. And in the late 20s, the short waves were opening up. The first telephone circuit across the Atlantic was, I think, 1924, when the telephone people set up one channel. You could talk one way and back, and that was all. But it was an immense improvement over a cable. Well, by the late 20s, short waves were coming in, and on the old low frequency stuff, atmospherics were a very limiting situation, apparently particularly in the summer. And so one of the first things they did was decide that they wanted to find out what the condition was in relation to atmospherics at short waves, say 15 meters, compared to 6,000 meters for their first telephone circuit. At that point, another bright, energetic, and observant young man appears on the scene. And here's what happened. It seems to be still open to some debate, but it is clear that he set up some equipment to scan around the horizon and determine the strength and the azimuth of which atmospherics came in. But it wasn't realized at that day that shortwave atmospherics are pretty sparse, that there isn't much, and most of the time his equipment just drew wiggly lines. So, supposing we take a look at what Jansky had. The final article has a footnote dated May 1932. And this footnote says that this idea of these bumps coming from the sun is wrong, because now they're leading the sun by 5 hours. Well, there wasn't much could be made out of that. But he persisted. He ran that thing for 2 more years. And he published another paper in 1933, wherein he definitely demonstrated that these little bumps on the chart were associated with not one direction, but with an assortment of directions which were coincident with the plane of the Milky Way. In other words, they weren't coming from the sun. I skipped over one point, which I probably should go back. See, after Hertz had demonstrated there were these long-wave electromagnetic radiations which could be produced in the laboratory, a lot of people independently must have guessed that if man can produce these Hertzian waves, then most likely Mother Nature can. And if you're going to hunt for natural Hertzian waves, the place to look for them is from the sun. Now, having an idea and doing anything about it are not necessarily related. So, the earliest record we have of anybody doing anything about it is by one of the most energetic doers of that day, Thomas Alva Edison. And there's a letter in the file, Lick Observatory, by one A.E. Kennelly. At that time, Kennelly was a young man and worked in Edison's laboratory. He later went to Harvard and became the Kennelly of the Kennelly Heaviside Layer. This letter says that Mr. Edison thinks that the place to look for solar Hertzian waves is someplace where maybe these waves get concentrated. And he suspects that an ore body might act as a drawing card for these hypothetical solar Hertzian waves. The Earth to scan the sky. This is a meridian transit instrument which could be set to any angle in a plane of the north, the zenith, and the south. And then it must be a periodic, that is, not selective in any particular wavelength, and the wavelength should be changed in some simple fashion. At one time early in the discussion, I considered a great big tilting billboard with a flock of little wires on it. This would be no good, because every time you change the wavelength, you'd have to pull all these wires off and put some more on. And then when you want to change back, you'd have to go through another week's work pulling all those wires off and putting some more on. So it turned out that a big dish would be most suitable, because to change the wavelength, all you do is change the equipment at the focal point. That can be done in a few minutes. And if you get tired and want to try another one, you get yourself some other equipment, pull the old stuff off, and put the new ones on. So I have been told I labored under very difficult and inauspicious circumstances, like the inventor in the attic. This is not true. I worked under very auspicious circumstances. I had training in electrical engineering at Armor Tech. I worked in the radio industry. I had access to the best test equipment of the day. And that day, the management was fairly enlightened. And if I wanted things built in the shop, I wrote out a purchase order, and the shop made them up for me at no charge. Apparently, the management valued my presence. So, also, the vendors of equipment had a more enlightened outlook on life. That is, they took some interest in what the customer wanted instead of trying to shove what they had down his throat. So this model was followed pretty carefully, and by that time it was possible to start computing strains and deflections and weights and all that stuff. So the following summer, 1937, the next picture shows the dish. And it's 10 meters across here. And this tips down into this surface tower. This is just made of wood, so it's sensibly transparent to radio waves. And you notice it's strictly a meridian transit instrument. And the first tests were made at a wavelength of 9 centimeters, 3,300 megahertz. The reason was quite simple: ignorance. If you don't know anything, you'd better admit it. So I had to make some kind of a guess, and I guessed that these celestial radio waves were some kind of black body radiation. Now, the intensity of black body radiation is proportional to square the frequency, or inversely proportional to square the wavelength. And at 9 centimeters, that's 150 times, or 150 times the frequency that Jansky used at 20 megs. The woman wrote back and said there'd be a little delay, but they were going to spruce the whole thing up and make it look presentable. And after that, they would take and send me some pictures. So the next one shows the pictures. That's how I looked nearly 50 years ago when I was building this thing. I don't know if there's much resemblance. Anyhow, go on to the next one. You see they painted it red, white, blue. That's good British colors. And on a green lawn, and they're taking such good care of it. Well, that's true. That is, they're doing a lot better care of it than if I had had it. Because it never was more than the dirty silver out there in Illinois. Now, I called your attention that the original installation was on piers, allowing it to turn only in the meridian plane. Because that's all that was really suitable there in Illinois. These kind of things were never envisioned as the wildest dreams of people in the 30s. And again, I say I'm happy to be here. Thank you. I don't know if it's on the docket, but give me some time. Should I ask for some questions? If there are any questions, sure. All right, anybody got any questions, raise their hand. One hand is enough.
Just a short one. Why are you living in Australia now?
Well, because after the war, a lot of different organizations took advantage of the microwave techniques developed during the then recent conflict. And consequently, there was a press for ever bigger dishes and ever shorter wavelengths to get more resolution. And really, there wasn't anything I could add. The subject was in good hands. So I don't go around kibitzing what other people are doing. And I decided that while everybody else was going to short waves, I would see what could be done at the longer waves, because they were being completely ignored. Now the longer waves have to get down to the surface of the Earth through the ionosphere. And at that time I was working for the National Bureau of Standards, and I had access to reams and reams of ionosphere data, and they were looking for maximum ionosphere electrons. I wanted minimum, so their analysis were useless as far as I was concerned. I had to get back to the bottom and analyze for the minimum electron densities. And lo and behold, it turned out there's two places in the world where this occurs. And one of them down there in Tasmania. So I made arrangements, went down there, and the Americans are pretty scarce down there, because this is sort of the back country. And I remember I used to frequently get questions from people as to why I came. That's it.
Not the sharp end.
Not the sharp end. Okay, look up this way.
How many have you got?
That's only 2 I've got. Look up this way. Good.
Okay.
I have one for the newspaper. Could I have
Sure, yes.
That's the idea. Okay.
It doesn't help. Hit back.
No.
Contact.
There you Okay. I should just check with Dr. Dudney. Is everything ready to go? Okay. Well, I'll just turn the stage over to Dr. Reber, who will open officially the 408 megahertz facility, and maybe something will happen. I don't know. It's all a surprise to me.
Well, I won't make any other long speech, but merely to state that this facility is the circular thing underneath the drops. Underneath that rectangular box is a circular thing about 1.5 feet in diameter and 6 inches deep. That's my contribution. So in response to that, they decided that I should connect these cables up. And when I connect the cables up, we should get a response out of where? On that. All right, and I understand they're pointed up now. See, they're not exactly at the zenith, but pointed at some radio source. What is it, 2C73 or something?
3C95.
Oh, okay, I'll settle for that. So, when I connect these up, this radio source will come in and appear on that recorder. So, here goes. Now, when I did this before, this popped out and that fell out. But they've got some nice bows on here to really spruce it up and keep it from falling out. So here goes. We're going to start the Reber facility. There we are. Now we're in business. I much appreciate all the technicians that they really made the thing go. I have had other circumstances that weren't so efficient.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to watch the pen recording or listen to the noise a bit longer, stick around. Otherwise, we'll head back over to the gate, to the main entrance, and if you'd like to tour around the facilities, I know that there's some very interesting things to see inside the building. Historical items and some of our modern techniques are on display. So have a nice afternoon, help yourself to coffee and snacks, and stay as long as you like. Thank you.
Feel free to wander around in here. This is our library, which contains display here of a few of the maps that we're now making, some in particular with the new Reber facility.
Right now, this is Lloyd Higgs' house.
Gee, our neighbors are going to think we're selling the house now.
Did Carrie tell you about and how arrogant she was? Is she going to...
Yes,
told me meeting her.
Yeah, she's an entirely different person.
Well, I've talked to her twice, and to be honest, I didn't find her like that at all. She was very
sort of abrupt.
But she wasn't this.
Well, in Vancouver, anywhere. You want to go in Vancouver? We used to live in Landecker. We have cousins certainly in Vancouver. There's no transportation.
You can't be without it, so that's just the way I operate.
Well, we go about 2-3 times a year, and once we go back to us. I'm not that good a traveler.
You gave us some dandelions. You gave us some dandelions. Double-headed dandelions. Planted them carefully up when he came home. And our hero said,
That's right, we really have
and he was very upset about that. And then you could
excuse to travel as long as we can save up enough money to do it.
But it must be, this must be a destination.
Oh, yeah. When they come, they stay for a while too. Oh yes, please.
I guess when you're young, you don't realize there's any pressure. Down from the outside.
Well, there's a Mother.
Tiger wants one. Joe sneaks in behind him.
I have stickers in the windshield. Back of the windows.
Ideally, you should have a small cable on the back and a small cable on the front. You know what I noticed?
Yeah,
On napkins, I see you might take your phone. I'm just so comfortable. My feet are just better than yours.
Do they pay you for that?
This, if you have recognized as St. Andrews. What do you call this here, Harry? Harry's domain, or what?
Pardon me?
What do you call this here, Harry's domain?
Harry's machine shop, yeah.
Harry's machine shop?
Focus box that is going to go to the focus of the radio telescope in the next few weeks. It involves an amplifier specially built for the observatory by the University of Alberta, and it goes to very, very low temperatures, which will enable us to get signals much more at much higher sensitivity than we have had before. The amplifier itself is in this large can, which is evacuated, and then a helium system takes it down to very, very low temperatures. Before the box goes up to the focus, it will have a covering of thermal insulation and waterproof insulation. It will then go up at the focus of the radio telescope. At the moment there is a very similar focus box up there and other radio sources in the sky. Controlled from this panel, and we have dials which indicate its position in the sky. One can turn on the motors by turning the switches here, which drive the telescope around, or in the other position of this switch, the computer controls it through a couple of boxes here. Normally we operate it with the computer running the telescope, and a whole night's observations can be set up and will run automatically. This is the computer which controls the big dish and also the spectrometer, so that we can get the spectrum of the radio waves. Mike is doing some programming now to enable us to present the spectrum as plots on a piece of paper using our big computer downstairs. At the moment we can show it on the oscilloscope here, but it's more convenient to plot it on the big computer.
In this room we have displays that pertain to the opening of the radio telescope in 1960 on this panel here. Some early newspaper articles and chart records from the early days, pictures taken during the construction. On the other panel are some recent maps taken with the Synthesis Telescope. Some on the left side relate directly to the new 408 facility on the telescope. Some of the other maps on the right side are the 1420 megahertz maps. Museum has disappeared. Oh, since yesterday. Sorry, are we too efficient here? Yeah, you're too efficient. There are a few items here still left. Such as this, what Tom calls a bird's nest. It's really a switching system to aid in the pointing of the 22 megahertz telescope. Some of the other items are frequency scanners and phase shifters that were used in early equipment here. A few examples of the technology changes in the last 25 years, integration circuits like this, and really circuits like this are much more powerful even than much bulkier equipment used 20 years ago. Here we have the scrapbook of the observatory. Last 25 years, beginning with the sort of construction phase, the 26-meter dish, right through into the 60s when the arrays on poles were constructed, and a little later on when the long baseline experiments first began, pictures of the equipment and the first fringes detected with this system, and later development of the synthesis telescope. Mainly clippings from the local newspaper. Right through to the present day. Things even put in the last few months. The library of the observatory, it's only really part of the library, the bound volumes before 1970. We have about 5,000 volumes here. It's a rough, very rough estimate. Here on the table we have the PhD and master's theses that over the years have been based upon research carried out at the observatory. Whoops.
This is Chris Burton at where?
Somewhere in the Arctic when there were experiments to see if there was a good site for low-frequency radio astronomy in the Canadian Arctic. They didn't find a good site, and eventually the 10 megahertz array was built here at Penticton. Chris did his research work here instead of the Arctic.
So how are you doing? I wasn't talking to you. Yeah, right. You didn't... Oh, it's just nuts around here. I can't believe it. You should have come, though. Yeah.
No, you could explain to the viewers here what this is here.
Oh, this is the office. No, well, I don't know what you want me to explain. This is the main office.
Jack?
What you're looking at now is our telex, our digital word processor and printer, our new switchboard, which Cindy is handling right now.
Did you want him to hang on the line, or?
And that is our AES C20 multi-plus word processor.
Okay, thanks.
And dual wheel printer.
I'll transfer you.
This is our pigeonhole thing where we stick all our mail when it comes in after it gets sorted.
Okay.
And people pick it up here. And of course our two famous filing cabinets without which we couldn't live. And it holds all our valuables. And this is John Galt. Good morning, John.
What sort of junk mail have we got?
Oh, no junk at all. No junk at all. No.
The labeling machine here?
Which one? The big one, the round? Oh, no.
Use process images from the computer files and whatnot. Just taken off the telescopes. That device there produces color images of the computer files, and right now I'm reading some data off the IRIS satellite data files. So looking for infrared images that may correspond to the radio images we're seeing. I'm Mike Henderson. I'm a co-op student from the University of Victoria. here for 4 months.
My name is Paul van der Werf. I'm from Groningen, Holland, and I'm working here on H1 here H2 regions. I had a survey done in July. I had a survey done in July with the DRAO Synthesis Telescope here, and it's looking pretty interesting. It's a previously unknown source with a funny tail on it that has never been seen before, really. That's all it is.
Okay. Oh. Jeff Dawson, technical staff.
And what's your function here?
Basically responsible for running of the computers and interfaces to the computer, and then the other digital electronics that needs to be built or repaired.
Heinz Wendker, forget it. I'm Heinz Wendker from Hamburg, and I'm a guest scientist here, and I'm working on the Cygnus X region, producing data from the Synthesis Telescope.
And how long are you going to be here?
I'm here since 3 weeks, and I have 2 more weeks to go. Then I go home to Hamburg.
And what do you expect to accomplish?
Oh, I hope that I can finish the reduction status of this observation and do the interpretation then in Hamburg.
Here is the trailer compound, one after the other. That's for the staff.
My name is Allaye-Chan. I've been working with the Dominion Radio Astrophysical Observatory for approximately 2 months now. And I'm currently working on the replacement of a control computer used in part of the SST system, and this is actually the control computer to Winglo's signal processing machine. This project will hopefully be finished by Christmas time, and currently the decision has been made to go with an STD bus system, and we have purchased most of the boards and so on for that, and right now I'm working on converting the software over so that it will fit the new system, and that's all I want to say.
Cool.
Having the new computer on a standard bus system such as the STD, it will be easier for work to be done in terms of expansion and in terms of repairs if need be, simply because that boards can be pulled out and replacement boards can readily be purchased and put back into the system without having to build boards from scratch every time, since this would be a waste of resources in a way.
This is what the coffee room looks like after the celebration.
Our central computer is a VAX 11780 and has 8 megabytes of main memory. We have 3 disk units that are attached to this and array processors, which performs our VAX cleaning. And attached to this array processor is also a high-speed disk unit. How do you mean? I don't. I don't really follow, like what do you can expect to accomplish? This isn't where I normally work. Gary Hovey, I'm an electrical engineer here at DRAO. This device right here is a terminal for the computer. All the messages that the computer outputs for the system is displayed here. Some of the other equipment here that you see around you is for exact timekeeping. We receive the RAN-C signal and keep sidereal time and solar time to very high precision, I guess. This is unrehearsed.
Because I don't think there's ever any
This here is our digital cross correlator. It's used in the SST system as well as up in the 26-meter dish. In the SST system, it's used to cross correlate a pair of antenna outputs. It has 26 channels and 6 available bandwidths. Bandwidths start at 4 megahertz and go down to 0.125 megahertz. The signals come in here and are cross correlated an average for approximately 8 seconds. After 8 seconds, this microprocessor will read out all the channels in this cross correlator and transfer that data to the 1123 computer. The equipment you see right now is configured for testing this unit, as it is very sensitive and can detect a signal buried in noise. Typically, we inject a sine wave signal into both sides of the digital correlator. This signal will be minus 30 dB, or 1,000 times weaker than the injected noise accompanying that signal. After about 7 seconds, the injected signal can be clearly seen on the CRT screen here, and more or less we use it to demonstrate the functioning, that the digital correlator is functioning correctly.
Okay, what did you just do? Oh, here's the signal.
This is the signal without, this is just random noise there. We don't have the signal generator turned on. This is without, this is just uncorrelated noise, independent random noise going into each side of the digital correlator. Now we'll inject a signal that's common to both inputs, and you'll see the cross correlator will pick out that signal. There it is right there. The sine wave signal, that signal is injected into that noise. It was about 1,000 times weaker than the noise itself.
I'm Peter Dewey, one of the staff scientists, and well, I work on the science that comes out of the telescope. The galactic and extragalactic astronomy, trained graduate students, trained co-op students, various things like that. You need anything more on me?
Go.
Well, my name is KT.